Everyone, welcome to the latest edition of Pro Wrestling Defined. I'm your host, Jonathan O'Dwyer, and please remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep up with all future content for interviews with current stars and legends of the business, and follow Pro Wrestling Defined on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, at Pro Defined on Twitter, to keep up with everything Pro Wrestling Defined. And awesome guest on the show today, former WWF and WCW superstar, former WWF Hardcore Champion, former WCW Tag Team Champion as part of the Perfect Event with Chuck Palumbo, former member of the Natural Born Thrillers, the awesome group in WCW, the one and only Shawn Stasiak. How are you doing today, my man? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, Jonathan, thanks for having me on. We finally connected. After all those private message Facebook clips, we're finally here.
It's great. It's awesome, and the studio looks awesome. Like, so it was all worth it in the end, man. So great to finally hook up with you on this. So first things first, talk about the YouTube channel that you're kind of in the process of relaunching now at the moment with new content and stuff. Talk about that and what you're up to these days.
Sure. Hey, before I get into that, I wanted to go ahead and just give my friends here, Real News,
Yes.
Real News PR here in Dallas, Texas. Awesome group. I'm really good friends with the owner, founder, I don't know what you call him, president, Jeff Crilly. Anyway, great guy, great team. They've got 7, 8 studios here in between these two buildings, and then of course they've got another location near where I live in a suburb. But anyway, any entrepreneur that's looking to get more public relations, media, get their message out there, their business, so to speak, to get a bigger outreach. They're great. They've got studios that have podcasts, they have their own episodes. I mean, it's really grown and picked up some momentum. So as you can see, the studio in here is beautiful. They're all like this. So I just wanted to give a shout out for any entrepreneur that's looking to advance their reach, that need media, promoting, marketing. These guys are great. So Real News PR, check them out.
Awesome, man. And we'll.
Sorry, we probably have a delay there. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh, your question about YouTube. I'm sorry. My YouTube channel. Yeah, it's Shawn Stasiak's World is the name of it. I'm just starting out. I've had a few videos on there for a few years, but I just didn't do anything with it. And so I just, I'm a bit of a YouTuber myself as far as, surfing and watching certain channels. And I just thought, why not start putting together I love video. I love expression. I love getting my message out there. I'm kind of a diverse guy. I wear different hats, and so I thought, why not create something, just to express, to be authentic and real, and just kind of showcase a plethora of all the hats I wear that make up my life. And so just started it out. So check it out when you get a chance. I'd love for you to subscribe, like, comment, share, hit the bell notification, all that stuff, and would love to grow with you guys. So that's the channel, more or less.
Awesome, my man. Everybody check that out, and I'll include the links in the description of this, and all the social media posts in as well for Shawn's channel. But where I wanted to start off before before we get chronological on things was just recently it was the 20th anniversary of the World Trade Center attacks, and WWE Network did an amazing documentary about the whole process of doing that Smackdown taping around that time. Talk about your memories of that week, where you were when you found out about the World Trade Center attack, and the Smackdown taping. What was that like? That whole thing must have been so different from anything you would ever experienced before. Talk about that whole experience.
Boy, I started getting goosebumps and kind of almost tearing up in a way just now thinking about that, because I saw that on Peacock on the WWE Network. I don't know if it's still called WWE Network, but it is now on Peacock. Anyway, that's where you go to watch some of the video library and the content. And I saw that piece, and boy, I was really, it really choked me up. It brought me right back 20 years ago, to that very day. And, when I watched that piece, I was emotional. I cried, but I also had goosebumps, and I was inspired because I was part of something that was so special and such a rarity, and I knew it was big back then when it happened to be part of we were the very first, assembly of its kind since that happened. So I just remember the emotion it was a mixture of emotions. I mean, you were scared, because you were so uncertain and unsure. God, nothing like this has ever happened, at least in my lifetime. Never experienced anything like that, and seeing those two big towers, and that's like the symbols of America, just symbolically. And every time I went to New York, I'd stare. I was always fascinated with big buildings and skyscrapers, and just the fact that the planes had ran into those buildings and they ended up coming down was just like good. I mean, it was just devastating. I mean, as you know. And I remember I woke up that morning, we were in Houston because we had just finished, and just like any of you fans that have watched, I recommend checking that piece out. It's like a 30-minute mini documentary, like Jonathan was saying. We had just finished Raw in San Antonio, and I remember I was traveling with Chuck Palumbo at the time, who was my tag team partner in WCW. We had not been working together in WWE much at that point. I think we were doing different things. I was working with The Rock. I was like the Wile E. Coyote of the WWE at the time, kind of the jackass comical relief of the show at the time. But we traveled together, and I believe Lillian Garcia was with us too at that time. I don't remember exactly, but anyway, we got to Houston. We checked in our hotel. Did the usual room service, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and I remember flipping on the tube and seeing CNN or whatever world headline news was taking place, and seeing the first, the aftermath of the first plane going in the building, and just like everybody else, basically, not knowing what was going on. And then we knew when the second plane hit, we knew that it was a terrorist attack. And I remember I went downstairs to the workout facility, because it's usually what I would do is get up in the morning, have my cup of coffee, go down to the fitness center in the hotel, get a little cardio in, usually when I was on the road. And I walked in there, and actually Vince McMahon was in there. And I remember looking at Vince and him sitting on the ground up against the wall with a towel around his neck, soaking wet, full of sweat. He's a maniac, till this very day still. I don't think he's even human, but, I just remember looking at Vince and saying, I don't remember word for word, but it was just, can you believe this? Like, what's going on, And he's like, and I remember him just sitting there, and if I could do a Vince McMahon impersonate, he just sat there and just went, those bastards. That's all I remember him saying, those bastards, And so, but it was just, it was a really uncertain, scary time, for everybody. And then we were just told to kind of hang out in Houston, because everything was shut down. The airports were shut down, and of course we were in Houston. I lived in Tampa at the time, and so we just stuck around for a couple of days, and then they just gave us the announcement that, hey, we're going to run a show. You don't have to be on it, but we're going to go ahead. We're going to move on with our lives. We're going to, and so there's some mixed emotions about it. Should we have ran a show? It's one of those things where some would disagree, and some were, what, let's screw that. Let's go ahead and get people's minds off of the news and this horror that happened, and let's represent our country with freedom and expression, and put some smiles on some faces and get people's mind off this for a couple hours. And so, and I was, I got goosebumps just now. I remember, and I raised my hand, I'm in, let's go, let's do it. And I remember when we were all out there standing at the very beginning of the show, we had our little American flag. I still have that somewhere, my American flag that they gave me. It's in storage somewhere. And I remember just standing in the building with 15, 20,000 deafening fans chanting USA. It was very patriotic that night. But at the same time, kind of spooked, thinking, God, is there something going to, did they got this place secure? Like, what if the word got around that, hey, these Americans got this live broadcast, let's go hit that next now. You know what I mean? Like, there was that uncertainty. So you're kind of like, feel like you're walking on eggshells, but at the same time, you're like, you know what? I'm only here once. This is my life. This is my, I'm gonna stand for what I believe in. And I guess my patriotism, I just felt it. It was awesome. And everybody was like, it was like one big family, it really was. It was just such a great family feel with all the talent, the personnel, the fans. It was just an amazing experience, man. I'm very, very proud that I was part of that under unfortunate circumstances.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, like, even going back, watching it in that documentary, I mean, it is it's so different, and it really, like, everybody should check that out. It really puts you in that place of what the mindset was at the time and everything. And yeah, it was incredible to go back and watch that again. But so let's get into the beginnings. Obviously, you're son of WWE Hall of Famer Stan Stasiak. Talk about did you always have a passion to get into wrestling from the time you were young and being in and around the business, or was that something that just kind of developed later on? Like, did you always have a passion for it, or how did that initially come to fruition of you getting into the business?
Well, yeah, obviously my father's influence is going to have a impact on me and influence me to want to. I was curious about it when I was real little. I don't think it really dawned on me until I was actually in high school that this is what I wanted to do, or give this a try. And I got a later start actually in my pro wrestling career, and I'll get into that in a second. But I had early memories of my father, of course, as young as probably 4 or 5 years old. I remember, my mother was with me, and my dad, I think he must have been in Madison Square Garden. This is probably when I was like in the mid 70s, right? And I just remember loud crowd, deafening noise, my dad in the ring, bleeding, and people. I was petrified. I was terrified that my father was bleeding, and everybody was yelling and happy about this because my dad was a heel. Yeah, I didn't know what that meant back then, So that was like probably a little too young to be taking me to a wrestling match, but that's why I'm so traumatized. That and Andre the Giant in my living room drinking beer with my dad till 5 a.m. in the morning. Could you imagine a 5-year-old boy hearing a ho, 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 and then wobbling down the staircase and looking, oh my God, there's a live giant in my living room drinking beer with my father until 5 a.m. So anyway, I've got, I had a very early introduction to a very wacky, different world. And so I think, of course, I was a big fan of my father. He was larger than life to me. He was, obviously, I think most dads probably should be to their kids. And my dad happened to do something very unique and different in way of work. And so I think I was just a fan of him. And, I wasn't smartened up until my early teens. So I was very protective and emotionally invested when I would see things happen. And a lot of my memories stem from Portland, Oregon. My mom, both my parents passed away, but my mom and her side of the family originated from Portland, Oregon. So a lot of my memories were during the territory days, back when Don Owens was a promoter it was Portland Wrestling. And they ran towns in Oregon and the state of Washington. And so I grew up around guys the early days of Roddy Piper, Playboy Buddy Rose, Dutch Savage, Sandy Barr, who was a referee but also a wrestler. He had his sons Jesse and Art Barr. Of course, guys like Rocky Johnson would come into town, right, every so often. Harley Race, Andre the Giant. And speaking of Rocky Johnson, and God rest his soul, he had a big impact on me too. Great physique, just different, was quick on his whole style. Everything about him was just different than a lot of the guys back then. So I was very drawn to that. But that's when I met a young Dwayne Johnson. When I was 10 years old, he was 8 years old. Dwayne was, and this is 1980. Yeah. And they used to put us in the Crow's Nest, it was called, in Portland, where they had the cameras and the commentating table, and the cameras would shoot out to the ring that was out a ways. And I hope I'm not getting off topic here. You asked me one question, I'm giving you 20 responses.
All good, man. All good.
But anyway, I remember. So they would have the wrestlers' family members sit in this designated area away from the general fans and crazy people, right? The fans. Yeah. To keep us somewhat safe, especially if your dad was a bad guy, because back then, man, the cat wasn't completely out of the bag then. People really, there was a lot of realism to that, people believed it was, it was some real heat at times, and, especially with the heels. And I remember the kids, when the matches were over, all the kids would run in the ring and play in the ring like a playground. And Dwayne and I were in there rolling around, and he headbutted me, and I thought that was the coolest thing. And I got in the car. My dad goes, "What's wrong? What's that goose egg on your head?" I said, "Oh, that's Dewey, Daddy. That's he gave me a headbutt. We were working on wrestling moves." He was concerned, but I thought that was the funniest thing. Of course, later, fast forward in years later, I was in the WWE, and I was out with Dwayne a couple times having dinner, and we would tell the story to others, like, "Yeah, I kind of grew up, and crossed paths with this guy. I used to beat him up in Portland when we were little kids." And of course, we would tell the opposite story, that he beat me up. So, yeah, that was a lot of influence on me from my father, and just being around, especially the Portland territory. We had moved here to Texas, Dallas, a couple different times. Of course, it was a hotbed for professional wrestling. The Von Erichs. I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than that here, and they were like gods here. The Sportatorium, just right down the street from here, okay? Right down the highway, a few exits. So, my memories as a young child, a young kid growing up, I was exposed to that. But I still don't think I was like, I want to be a pro wrestler until I was in high school. And I had, I wrestled collegiately, and I had a very successful amateur career, both in high school and college. Not to toot my own horn, but I was a 3-time provincial champion, and I took second and third in Canada for our, Canadian nationals. And then, I was a 2-time runner-up at the Pac-10 Division I, NCAA's, ranked top 12 in the country. I'm really putting myself over here, aren't I? But my point is,
you might as well.
My point is that I was really focused on amateur wrestling, and I was watching, and of all things, I was sitting there watching a wrestling show, WWE, because I was living in Oakville, which is a suburb outside of Toronto at the time. I was living there. And I was probably like 17, 18 years old, and I was on the phone with a good buddy of mine, and I said, "Hey, you got wrestling on?" And we're watching wrestling, and I'm on the phone with him, and it was a Mr. Perfect match. And I remember looking at him, watching him, and I was already a fan. And I had met Curt when I was in Portland when I was a little kid. He was just coming up through the ranks, and Portland was a territory that a lot of these guys that became huge names went through to make a living, but to hone their craft, to get, with airtime, TV time, interviews, promos, the whole, just to perfect the craft. So these territories were great for that, right? To really learn the craft. So I had met Curt, but I hadn't seen him in years, but I saw him as Mr. Perfect later when he showed up on WWE, back then WWF. And I remember talking to my buddy, and I said, "Matt," his name is Matt. So I'm giving a shout out to you, Matt. You need better phone etiquette, Matt. I left you some WhatsApp clips. You better get back to me. Anyway, I'm on the phone with Matt, and I said, "Matt, I'm gonna be a pro wrestler." Like, duh. No kidding, Shawn. I mean, we always knew that, but I didn't really think that much. I was more of a baseball fan, loved hockey. You know what I mean? I just wasn't, I looked at it as more of a fan, and a fan of my father. But then, but in high school, I'm working out at the gym with my buddies. We're watching wrestling every week. I started getting inspired by some of these larger-than-life characters, like, Ultimate Warrior with the physique and the face paint. Sting, of course, later, the Road Warriors. I love the theatrics, and Rick Rude, and even, Piper, and all these names, all these, Hogan even, just inspired by these guys. But it was a Mr. Perfect match that I saw those white boots, that singlet, the long flowing blonde hair, spitting the gum out, the towel thing, that whole gimmick with Bobby Heenan. And I said, I'm going to be a pro wrestler. And I thought it was so bizarre and ironic that fast forward years later in WCW, I would face off against one of my teenage idols, man. It was so awesome. I was so honored to work with Curt Hennig. And even though it was towards the tail end of his career, it's still Mr. Perfect, man. It's still Curt Hennig. And the thing, and I don't mind, and I'll share this last part with the Curt Hennig about, getting into the business and all that, what inspired me. He was one of them for sure. I felt so uncomfortable, though, when they had me go over on him and to also beat him in his own perfect plex. I felt so uncomfortable with that. I told Curt, I said, is there any way we can do something different where I can, if I'm going to go over, can I put my foot on the rope? Can I pull you? Can we do some chicken shit type, heel move? But I felt so uncomfortable because I had so much respect for Curt Hennig, and God rest his soul too. So that's the moral of kind of what the buildup was for me to get into professional wrestling, what inspired me.
That's a cool statement, though. The fact that he went through with that says a lot of how much he must have thought of you, Curt Hennig. The fact that he put you over at that point, and with his move as well. So like that says a lot of how highly he thought of you at the time.
Yeah, it did speak volumes, and I know that he loved my dad. He really looked up to my father, because my father and his father, Larry the Axe Hennig, worked together, and they were great friends. So I think it was just that commonality of second generation, and our fathers worked together. And my dad knew Curt when he was a little kid, so there was that relationship there too. So I think it's kind of like, hey, he's kind of like part of maybe a distant family, I guess. Who knows?
Sure. And so we'll get into your the first WWF run with the meat gimmick. Talk about who came up with it, who came up with that storyline. Was that a Vince Russo idea, the gimmick and the storyline with Terry Runnels and Ryan Shamrock?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was either Vince Russo or Ed Ferrara, I think, actually, who was also a writer for WWE at the time, if you remember that name.
Yeah.
And I think I heard this, I heard the story, and I think this might have been where it stemmed from, but I guess there was some movie that Ed Ferrara and his father loved. I don't know what it was. There was a character in the movie named Meat, and and I guess his dad's nickname was Meat on a softball team. I don't know. They had this thing with the name Meat, and they thought that, and somehow they were coming up with one-word gimmick names at the time, with the Attitude Era. And so, yeah, I'll be honest with you. When I first was pitched that, I wasn't overly pleased. I had anticipated my majority of my, or at least a big part of my life, anticipating becoming a pro wrestler and taking after my father and carrying the Stasiak legacy name, and all that hard training and work and working out in the gym and the amateur wrestling and practicing my craft in front of cameras and just anticipation to train to be here finally. And here's your gimmick name, it's Meat. I explain this to people as it's kind of like an actor. You got to look at it like that. At least I did at the time. You know what, it's a role. Go ahead and pick it up, play it the best to your knowledge. It's not going to be your only role that you'll play, your only character you'll portray, like in a film, for instance, or a TV show. Just play the character the best you can. Get your start, get your feet wet. And I had some veterans. They understood that I was a little disappointed with the whole idea, because I really wanted to be what I perceived my professional wrestling career, what I anticipated was going to be much more. I mean, I know it's entertainment, and it's good to make people laugh and put smiles on faces, but I wanted to be taken more seriously. And I wanted to be the very first father-son duo to ever win the WWE Championship. And by the way, that's never been done to this very day. That's still a piece of history that's still out there.
Wow.
But yeah, I just took it and ran with it, and it didn't last, 8-9 months, and then it was over anyway. So there you go.
And we'll get into a few more bits about the Meat character during the fan questions later on. But we get into the WCW run. Is that why you ended up going to WCW? Was it just kind of disappointment over the Meat character, or how did the WCW deal come about?
Well, Jonathan, this story has followed me around my entire career, and for a while there, it used to bother me, but I just finally embraced it and realized that my name and my career and my transition from my first reign in WWE into WCW was because of an incident that took place called the tape recorder incident. And I'm sure you might have heard of this, but I'll go ahead and share a quick Reader's Digest of the story. It's basically a rib gone bad. You've heard the term, and not to sound cliche, wrong place, wrong time. That's exactly what it was. I wasn't working for Hard Copy. I wasn't working for another wrestling company. Mike Enos, one of the Beverly Brothers, told me years ago, he said, professional wrestlers are like junior high school students with money. There's a lot of juvenile stuff that can take place in that business. And it's all part of the culture, I guess, right? But a lot of paranoia in that business. Shit, I was paranoid, when I first came in. I just, I don't think I dealt with my father's death, to be quite honest with you. It was very shortly after he had passed away that I had my opportunity to go into WWE, and I think I put too much pressure on myself and was way too hard on myself, became almost neurotic and drove people nuts. I mean, just with wanting to be almost a perfectionist, wanting to not screw up so bad that guess what? If you try too hard not to screw up, guess what happens? You screw up, right? So I tell people now, I say, have fun, man. Be respectful, pay your dues, but have fun. Go, because it doesn't last very long, Life is short, especially a wrestling career, with any professional athletes too. Just have fun and enjoy it, let it rip, and chances are you'll do better, you'll perform even better, But it was a rib gone bad. Played a joke on a couple wrestlers that actually just backfired on me and made me look real bad at the time. And looking back at that, I think, well, if I now being a veteran type or being around the business for so long, if some rookie came in and had a tape recorder and was recording a couple conversations as a joke to play it back for them later, to say, hey, this is what you guys sounded like in the car. That's all it was intended for. And that person lied and said, oh, no, and put the tape recorder away. And then you go and hear your voice, your conversation. It makes that person look really bad. And I could see why there would be a trust issue. And that's what happened, man. It was just a really unfortunate thing that no wrongful intent whatsoever. I think most people that know me, that know the story, and by the way, that's an amazing story. It's funny how a story gets out and it gets so fabricated and so exaggerated. I've heard like 20 different versions of the tape recorder incident that I was so paranoid, right, Jonathan? I was so paranoid that I had a tape recorder to just see who was talking about me, who was talking behind my back. Let me get a tape recorder. Come on, man. I had the tape recorder. My dad got me my first tape recorder. And I was, here you go, Shawn, here, player. I used to do impersonations, imitations as a little kid. I love documenting things, like I said, with the YouTube channel. I was the guy in high school that always had the video camera. I was always, recording things. And also, too, and I'll give this advice to any young talent out there that's trying to develop their craft. And it was told, Tom Pritchard, Dory Funk Jr., who trained me, said, hey, you're on the road for many hours. You're spending a lot of time on the road. Perfect your craft. Get a tape recorder. Cut promos, work on your interviews, listen to it back, critique it. That's why I had it in the first place. If I was working for a hard copy, or if I was trying to pull something on somebody in a malicious way, why the heck would I leave my tape recorder in a gym bag with a bunch of wrestlers? And you know what I mean? Come on, man. I would have like sealed it up and FedExed it back home or to whoever I was working with, right? So-called whoever I was working with. So, yeah. But, it got me fired, man. And it caused me a lot of grief. That was a really, really tough time. One of the hardest times of my life, because I anticipated a lot of my life to have this opportunity and then to get fired and to lose my dream job because of something so, honest to God, was so innocent. But it looked so bad at the time. Again, wrong place, wrong time, just the way it looked. Boy, that was it, man. And so I was concerned because the only other viable company at the time was WCW. And, now I think Vince Russo was already over there with Ed Ferrara, and those guys, we had a good relationship, I thought, or at least a decent relationship. But I was concerned because, it's a small world, and people talk and the boys talk and the word got out that, Stasiak's recording people. We can't trust them, you know what I mean? And I was like, would I get an opportunity to go over to the other company and be part of that? And so I think with Russo and I think he must have had a word with Paul Orndorff. I keep saying, God rest their soul. There's so many guys we've lost, so many brothers, God, and
this year alone even has been bad.
Pardon? Oh, this year alone.
Year alone, even we've lost so many.
I know. And Paul was a huge Mr. Wonderful. He's one of those guys that inspired me, man. I was so just great physique, intense, real athlete, just believable. I love Paul Orndorff. I was a huge fan. And I hadn't seen Paul in a while, but, you learn that he he had passed, it's still like, well, that's part of my upbringing, that's part of my childhood, that's part of my culture, that I'll never be able to see him again. I'll never be able to see him at an autograph signing or an appearance. That's fine. I mean, he's in a better place. But I think Russo had a word with Paul, because Paul ran the power plant with Sarge at the time. And so they said, hey, probably give him a shot, probably test me out. So that's when I went to WCW for a tryout at the WCW power plant. This is in 2000. Yeah, right after 2000. And I hung out there for a week. And that's where I ran into and met the likes of what he had mentioned earlier, the Natural Born Thriller members that would become later, Natural Born Thrillers. Chuck Palumbo, Sean O'Hare, Mark Jindrak, Mike Sanders, Reno, Johnny the Bull, and Kiwi, and all these guys, man. I was, I knew I had the goods. I had, enough talent. I was still green. I was still very new in the business at the time. But I was concerned, were they going to accept me? Because that was the bigger question. How am I going to be perceived? Am I going to be rejected because of what, but we had some time to spend together. We went out to lunch, we worked out together. And I think they heard the story. They believed my story, which is the truth. And I think they just said, that just sucks. That's too bad, man. And I think they just accepted me. They kind of accepted me into their group, and went down there a couple times, and finally got the phone call from Paul or Kevin Sullivan or someone, and just said, hey, welcome to the team. Welcome to your new home, And I even told Paul, I remember sitting there with Paul and Kevin Sullivan. I said, guys, I want to be the next Mr. Wonderful in honor of you, Paul. I know there can never be another Paul, or there can never be another anybody, but it was out of just respect and honor of Paul Orndorff, and just being so influenced by him. I wanted to have that opportunity to be able to showcase and have that style and that effect on people. So yeah, that's how my WCW career started, really. The embryonic stages of how that all developed, the transition from the tape recorder incident, getting fired, into getting tryouts with WCW, and then finally getting called up to the main roster for WCW. And then they put me with, had that feud with Mr. Perfect. And then they put Chuck and I together to work with Brian Clark and Brian Adams, Chronic. And that was fun. I had a lot of fun. And, Brian Clark and I have reconnected recently, and he's a great guy, man. It's funny. It's like a brotherhood, We pretty much talk every day. We clipping each other back and forth, and he's working out. I got him doing 2-a-days, and he's still at it, man. And he's a very creative guy. I learned a lot about him I didn't know back then. I just worked with him, a few times, and always got along backstage. I think that if we could go back in time, or we were in the same situation, I definitely would be traveling, with Brian Clark, and if Brian Adams is still here with us, God rest his soul. Brian was a great guy too. I didn't know him real well, but he was always very kind, very nice to me. I liked working with those guys. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, you had an awesome run together. I absolutely love I love the team name that you and Chuck had, the Perfect Events. Yeah. I just thought that was awesome, and the Natural Born Thrillers. But your matches with Chronic were awesome. I mean, people should go back and watch Bash at the Beach 2000, yourself and Chuck against Brian Adams and Brian Clark, Chronic. Absolutely awesome match.
Yeah,
one of my favorite tag team matches from WCW. That's where Chronic won the tag titles back from you. It was absolutely awesome. But talk about what Chuck was like to team with, and then the transition into the Natural Born Thrillers group, because they were you were one of the hottest acts in WCW in 2000. It was something really new and fresh, and kind of cutting edge to it. I started watching WCW in kind of summer of '99, but missed, say, December to April or May. So I was really into it just as all of that was kind of beginning, the whole New Blood storyline,
right.
You and Chuck, and then the Natural Born Thrillers. So talk about the Natural Born Thrillers and teaming with Chuck and winning the tag titles together.
Well, teaming with Chuck I loved it. It was great, man. I was so happy at that time because what I had just gone through with that whole WWE, such a letdown, such a nightmare, man. Like, look, I've lost my mom, I've lost my father. We've all gone through tough times and grievances, right? But that situation with that incident that took place, and knowing that it was so there was no wrongful intent. It's like being accused and being punished for something that if they only knew your heart, if they could hook your brain or your heart up to a monitor to say, okay, let's see the truth with this person, they would know, okay, we got nothing to worry about, man. This guy just screwed up, dumb mistake. You know what I mean? But that was one of the biggest things. I mean, probably top 10 things in my life that are the biggest grievances that I've had to go through. That's one of them, man. That caused me a lot of despair. That was a tough period for me. And I was just so happy and so grateful that WCW gave me an opportunity. And I was welcomed into that group, and in the locker room too. I got to tell you a little quick story though, and remind me to get back on track. I got it because I'll forget it. So Brian Knobs, we're in the locker room, right? We're in the locker room, and Sid Vicious is there, and I don't know who. I'm trying to think. Sid was there. Brian Knobs, of course. I mean, I think Chuck was with me. Some other wrestlers were getting laced up for the show. And I just remember Brian Knobs goes, "Hey, Stasiak," because he's very loud. You can't miss Brian Knobs. Yeah. "Stasiak, why don't you take that tape recorder and stick it right here?" He bends over, butt naked, and I'm like, "Oh my God." I think they were just testing me to see how I would take it. Like, was I going to get pissed off? I couldn't stop laughing, man. It was so funny, man. It was just his way of saying, "Don't worry about that. We accept you here. We trust you, man. Just keep your nose clean and walk the straight and narrow. We're good." I had to share that story, but anyway,
that's awesome.
But I was just I was so happy and so grateful that I had the opportunity. And honestly, when I look back at my WCW career overall, and I'll get into those specifics here in a second, but I was so I felt so blessed because I ended up getting more TV time. I ended up becoming a 3-time World Tag Team Champion for WCW. Traveled the world, had so much fun with Kevin Nash and the Thrillers, and just I wish I would have endured it more. I was out of the whole group. I was kind of a little bit in the beginning, a little bit of an outcast, and I'll get into that in a second. You asked me how I accepted that. At first, I didn't care for it. I wanted to be a singles competitor. I didn't want to be put in a faction. I wanted to break out and develop myself as a solo, singles wrestler. But I WCW and look, all I ever wanted to work for was WWE. I grew up. I lived outside of Toronto for years, and that's on the East Coast, Eastern Seaboard. That's all call it New York, Vince's territory, right? And that's all I ever wanted to work. I never wanted to work for WCW. I've never worked for any other promotion except for WWE and WCW. I've had some independent matches, and I never went to TNA. I've been backstage at AEW a couple of times, which maybe we'll get into here in a second, because it's pretty exciting what's happening with the wrestling world now, with that company. And I'm very happy for them, man. I think that's awesome. But
definitely.
With Punk coming back, oh man, I was goosebumps, man, seeing his. I'm skipping around here, so let me get back to so WCW was just an awesome experience for me. Very blessed, so grateful that I had the experience. Wish I would have enjoyed it even more, because I was a little bit of a pain in the ass at the time. And I think there's a little bit of in the beginning, maybe a little bit of tension or dissension amongst myself and maybe a couple of the members, because I think they felt people can feel energy, and they could feel without even saying it. I just didn't want to be. I just want to be part of the group. And in fact, I think one of the angles that we ran is when they were outcasting me, Kevin Nash and the Thrillers, by kind of kicking me out of the group and then feeding me to Goldberg. Was one of the storyline angles there for one of the shows. And I think that wasn't too far at the time from how I really felt. And I think that they really felt that. But then I came around and ended up getting to know them better. And I just kind of accepted it. And I was just, I just kind of just developing and groom myself into it. And so that was, I look back now, it was a great experience. I really enjoyed working with those guys, and talk about great athletes for guys that size. I was the least athletic of all these guys, as far as like maybe in the gymnastics aspect of things. I mean, Sean O'Hare, 6'6", 280, doing backflips and spin kicks. I mean, you know, and I'll watch some of these older this older footage, and I see, I think I was so focused on. It's a very self-centered, selfish business. You got to focus on yourself, your brand, your character. I mean, you're just immersed in what can I do to elevate myself to that next level, right? And Absolutely. I go back and look at this footage and go, oh my God, Sean O'Hare had a great look. Just look, I mean, not just he had an athletic, functional body, not like nothing against bodybuilders, but like just the flips and the things that he could do, his athleticism was incredible. Same with Palumbo, smooth, just athletic transitions. Jindrak, great athlete, you know. I'm the only one that didn't do all those crazy flips and stuff, but I think I had a little bit more experience at the time because I had that year and a half, 2 years of WWE with the developmental and then being on the main roster. So I think I had a little bit more of maybe a ring savvy where I didn't have to do as much and I could still get maybe even more of a reaction to piss people off as a heel, you know? So Isn't that the whole idea?
Rely more on psychology.
Right, man. Like, isn't that the whole idea? Try to do less is more and try to get more of a reaction, you know, so you get more mileage out of your career. So, but, and then, you know, being tag team champs with Chuck was just awesome. We won the belts from Chronic in a very cheesy way. For the disqualification, I didn't know you could win a belt on a disqualification. That was always the rule that you couldn't win but we won them somehow. And you know the irony of that is, that match took place outside of Boise, Idaho, of all places, and that's where I went to school. I went to Boise State, right? And that's also where I developed. I'm going to get into this a little bit more, but it's an alter ego, theatrical expression of Dr. Shawn. I'm a chiropractor, by the way, in case those who don't know. I've been a chiropractor for the past 15 years here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Dr. Shawn's alter ego is a character named Phobia, and that's spelled Phobia. And you can check out the outdated website at phobiatv.com, which is soon to be upgraded soon, so stay tuned for that. These are some cheap plugs, Jonathan. I'm sorry, man.
It's all good, man.
But I'm a big kid. I love Halloween, right? Big kid, love Halloween. I got tired of being, one year I'm the Ultimate Warrior. The next year I'm Rick Rude, a chubby Rick Rude at the time. And I said, you know, I'm tired of being these other wrestling characters for Halloween. So I'm going to do, what can I do? I'll do my own thing, right? Next year kind of thing. So it's the springtime. I have school exams. I'm in the dormitory, in the dorm room, right? There's no air conditioning, but I had a fan on and I had my windows down to get, you know, some cool breeze at night. I noticed, Jonathan, for a couple of weeks, I get these, I was feeling nauseous and I had these bumps on my face. And at night I'd feel these little, like, I don't know, like something was like little, I don't know, like debris or something. I'm sleeping, and this went on for 2 weeks. And I'm thinking, okay, I got stress bumps from being, you know, stressed out from exams. I feel kind of nauseous because I'm just not taking care of myself, I guess. I went to the nurse's, or the little clinic for students, right? She does a little cotton swab thing, comes back, says, Shawn, those aren't stress bumps, those are spider bites. And are you okay?
Oh, Jesus.
You're not having spider bites,
I
are you?
accidentally poked myself in the eye.
Oh, geez, look at that. Look at the effect I have on people. We're across the Atlantic Ocean. Look at the power Phobia brings. I can just talk to you and I can start causing damage. Anyway, lo and behold, I go back to my dorm. You okay there?
Yeah, no, all good.
I go back to my dormitory room, right? There's a spider nest underneath my bed. So I had a spider nest under my bed the whole time. I couldn't go back to that room. I couldn't. I had to spend the next week and a half with a friend's house. I said, I got to finish I can't go back. And I was so freaked out. Even the exterminator did this. I can't go back in there. So later that Halloween, I decided to, you know, what could I cover my face with? And I thought, you know, a spider. And I had this fear of spiders, and I had all the, you know. And so I did the spider gimmick, and I'm looking in the mirror, and I muttered one word under my voice, and I just said, fear, phobia. I have a phobia. Arachnophobia is fear of spiders, but that one word, phobia, came across my, you know, I just said it out loud. And then because I had a great rapport with the local news station in Boise, Idaho, Channel 7 News, I used that character to cut PSAs to the kids, like safe trick-or-treating, don't talk to strangers, check your candy, blah, blah, blah. And I used that footage to send to WWE to get my actual tryout with WWE. So the Phobia character is essentially what got me my tryout with WWE, right? And so we never used the character ever. And, you know, there was a couple times I thought maybe we would. When Hogan was with TNA, we spoke for a little bit, and he wanted to possibly bring that in. He liked the character, thought Steve Borden needs a nemesis. I'm like, great, there's another teenage idol of mine, Phobia is kind of a younger Stinger, Surfer Sting, kind of, there's some similarities there, you know. I don't know if you've seen some of my images. Sure. And but it never came to fruition, and I was very disappointed in everything. But now looking back, Jonathan, and fast forward to where we are today, I'm so happy and glad that we never used it for a wrestling character, and not to devalue any face-painted wrestling characters, because I've been inspired by a couple of them. It just would have been another cheesy face-painted wrestling character. So now I have an opportunity, and which I've been doing and working on, doing various things with, to take it to more of the, comic book world, cinema, you know, there's some different film projects and things that I'm going to be working on. So it's got a bigger message than that too. And the character stands for, you know, it's fear, but the message is, you know, face your fear and own your life. Too many times we, including myself to this very day, I battle it every day, you know, is wrestling with fear. It could be fear of success, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of change in the world with this pandemic that's hit the world. A lot of change, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear is circulating in the world. And so this character is very near and dear to my heart. It's essentially a theatrical expression of Shawn, of me, you know. And it's become more and more real as I've gotten older, because I can, you know, when I connect with what the meaning is, and you know, it's more than just a face-painted character. So the reason why I started talking about this is because Boise, Idaho, that's where it really all began for me with my pro wrestling career. I sent the tape out, got my tryout, and then who would have thought years later, of all the cities and places you could go, I'd be back in Boise, Idaho, basically, Nampa, Idaho. It's a suburb, like 20 miles away, to win my very first title, in this case, WCW Tag Team Champion with Chuck Palumbo, defeating Chronic in Nampa. Come on, man. It was just like full circle. It's so crazy that it was there. Full circle. So
amazing.
Boy, that's a long story. That was a long story just to get to Boise, Idaho, isn't it?
It was good, man. It's all good. I love a good full circle story. Anybody that watches my interviews knows that I like a good full circle story. I like seeing how through people's hard work and everything, how things seem to just kind of circle back around, and you have these special kind of tied in moments with certain sentimental things, like, so that's really cool though. I like that. Yeah, but just getting into behind the scenes in WCW, like Vince Russo was the head writer in 2000. How was your relationship with Vince, and did you get to work with Bischoff much? So I'm not sure timeline wise how long he would have been there when you were there, but how did you get along with Vince, and if you had much interaction with Eric Bischoff?
Well, Bischoff's on my shit list right now, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, okay.
Well, I didn't, you know, everyone and their grandmother has a podcast, right? He's got a thing called 83 Weeks. It's pretty good. Actually, I've always liked Eric. I think Eric's actually, the way he presents himself, he's a great speaker. I saw his TED Talk. I was very impressed with that. He's very articulate, uses elegant words. He's a very intelligent guy, you know. And I never, you know, I would cross, you know, paths with Eric backstage here and there. It was always just, how you doing? Shake your hand. I think I came to him for a couple, you know, get his insight on a couple things. Hey, could you watch my match? Let me know what you think of this promo, whatever. And that's where I'm going with this. Speaking of promos, apparently Well, here's the thing. I look back at my work, and I cringe most of the time. I'm like, God, I wish I had an opportunity to go back and redeem myself on that. That sucked. And the thing I was doing with Stacy Keibler and the Bam Bam Bigelow angle, it was kind of cheesy with the hairspray. It was such vanity and stupid. I mean, if I ever were to grace the ring or the wrestling world again, you can rest assured I would never. I'm not a poser. I'm not a narcissist. Although my friends will call me that because I play this narcissist character. I'm always posing at them and doing stupid things, just for their amusement. But basically, you just get an extension, a real reflection of me, Shawn, and that's just a guy. I'd say I've always said this, a guy that's full of piss and vinegar, world-class athlete, looking to kick some ass and create history with his father. That was the longest for the longest time, the campaign that I was pushing for, to make history in the WWE, becoming the first father-son duo to ever win that title. But I realize that some of my work I cringe to. It's cheesy, but I guess Bischoff, I'm a lousy talker on the mic. I guess and it just came across in a way that was very, I don't know, a little bit arrogant, and I was surprised, like, man, I thought we were, there's different ways and choices of words you can use maybe to say, okay, I wasn't too crazy about this or that, but I was just like, okay, you're going to judge me and base me on one promo, one night of promos, Are we not allowed to have an off night? Shit happens. So anyway, But as far as Eric, I never had I never had a deep relationship with him. And same with Vince, really. I mean, it was just maybe a little bit more than Eric because, he was writing the show at the time that I was there. And so we would go over certain things. But usually the agents is really what, we would work things out with the match and whatnot coming from Vince. And if there was any question or specifics, I would just go to Vince. But I always felt comfortable around Russo. I did his podcast, I think 3 or 4 years ago. We had an interview, and I've never had a problem with him. Him and Bischoff, they're very polarizing people, aren't they?
They seem to be.
Yeah. Same with Jim Cornette too. I mean, I think that's just the nature. I think that's just the nature of the business, I mean, you just got these polarizing people. But just to answer your question, I always liked Eric. I never got to know him real well, but didn't have didn't work together with him much at the time. Because I think that when they brought the new blood in, and they had that what was it, the veterans versus the new blood.
Yeah, the Millionaires Club, I think, was the veterans group, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Millionaires Club. It was like dissension going on backstage, and I think Eric left, and I don't even remember. It's so vague to me, but that's pretty much my relationship with those two guys.
And so we fast forward on to the final Nitro. What are your memories of that night? The hostile takeover, so to speak, like of WWE coming into to camp, and like you worked with Bam Bam that night, went over on it. But what are your memories of kind of even the lead up to that, like hearing this that Vince had bought the company and the whole lead up to the whole buyout happening?
Well, I had heard the rumors about the company is going to be bought out by WWE. And honestly, Jonathan, I felt that my work had progressed. I felt that since they gave me the opportunity to kind of be a solo, of course they stuck me with Stacy Keibler, but I thought I was comfortable with her. I thought it was a compliment to the character and the cheesiness of the character at the time, and I just felt, and I was in shape. I felt like I fine-tuned myself physically. I felt that my promos were improving. I mean, it's just like it takes time just like with any craft, man. You got to work at it for a while to get better and better. And I just think with repetition, I just felt that I was getting more comfortable and finding myself a little bit more as a singles wrestler. And so I think that if that company would have stayed around, I mean, I had heard rumor that the next elevation for me was and I don't know how true this really is, but this is what I had heard. I think it was from Johnny Laurinaitis at the time, because he was an agent back then too. I'm not quite sure what his position is now with WWE. I know he's back there, but he said it's going to be between you, Booker T and Jeff Jarrett, kind of like three of you kind of battling for the U.S. title or something. It was an elevation, and I was like, great, man, that's awesome, because I had great matches with Booker T. I worked with Jeff one time. Those guys were both smooth because they're such good veterans, and but Booker, man, I just felt I had great chemistry with him. I really enjoy working with him. I think he's a great talent, and he's a funny guy too. He's I can never keep a straight face around him, but yeah, that was I felt confident, even though what had happened about a little over a year prior with that tape recorder incident. I just had this faith, Jonathan. I just felt, hey man, you've honed your craft better. You've kind of had a proving grounds. You were accepted by this company. I mean, I wasn't overly worried or concerned that I wouldn't be accepted back. And I was one of the first 10 contracts to be bought back over. At the time, it wasn't the big contracts like guys that were holding out, like the Stings and I think Lugers and Scott Steiners and guys that had the bigger contract, which made sense. They had guaranteed money, and I don't know the details, but if they would have gone over, they might have broken it. And it was just made more sense for those guys on a financial business sense to stay away for a while, rest up and maybe come over later. So for me, they just bought it right over, and I was, I have mixed emotions about that. And I mean, I was grateful at the time, but I don't want to sound like I'm bitching and complaining, but I think it's pretty obvious that I don't think WB really had plans for me to really go to that next level. The best they seemed to have for me was to rub shoulders with The Rock and be the jackass clown running the milk trucks and walls, even though it was an honor to work with Dwayne and it was funny at the time. And, it's about putting smiles on faces. But, I look back now, they fed me to guys like Brock Lesnar. It was just these squash matches, more or less. So I think I was almost looked upon as kind of like the cost of doing business. You have business expenses and write-offs. I felt that Shawn Stasiak and his contract was a write-off because we're going to feed this guy to build other people. And I just seemed to never be able to get momentum going. The Planet Stasiak idea was cheesy and stupid. It was not, my idea was really based more from the actor Jim Carrey in The Riddler and Batman. His mannerisms and demeanor and traits, it was supposed to be more like that. A force to reckon with. He might be a little out there and he's a little crazy, but he needs to be taken seriously. Very charismatic, very colorful, right? I even had these visions of my entrance with this character, and it would have ran into some animation and kids that put these like Jeff Jarrett used to have this with those glasses that would blink, those little shades that would blink with lights. I had this vision, and in the arena that the lights would go out when Planet Stasiak's making his flight in a spaceship from Planet Stasiak to wherever that city, that town was, and then it would be displayed on the screen, and it's here, Dallas, Texas, and boom, and it's really cool theatrical. If I could take my vision and have it transcended into them portraying it the way that I had it, it would have gotten over huge. It would have been a big revenue draw. Merchandise, kids would have loved it. It would have been really cool. But we just never got on the same page. And I wasn't, I guess, at that time, just not at the point where I could really do much. My hands were tied, because I just wasn't able to get that, the right people, I guess, And I want to say this without sounding, that I'm complaining. But look, at the end of the day, man, you have to have somebody that has influence behind the scenes to go to bat for you and represent you. And I just never really had that person. I didn't have a Jim Ross or a Pat Patterson. Guys like The Rock, had Pat, for instance. And Dwayne's awesome, man. He worked his ass off, and he deserves everything that he's gotten, even in Hollywood. I'm very happy for him, man. It's awesome what he's done. And I think he's a good human being too, a good person. But you can only go so far in life. You can have all the talent in the world. You can have all the potential. You can have, that goes with musicians, actors, in this case, pro wrestlers. You got to have the right people. The stars got to line up, man. You got to have the right things to make it all work, to really, really get over and work. And unfortunately, I just couldn't get on the same page with the right people, I guess, I don't know where that came from. I don't know why I gave you all that, but there you go, man.
Oh, that's all good, man. That's all good. We'll just get into some quick fan questions before we sign off. Excuse me. John Showan wants to know about Kurt Angle's debut match. Did you kind of envision how big of a star Kurt would go on to be from that debut? Did you see the potential for big things for him?
Yeah, well, I trained with Kurt. I was part of those. They're called the Funking Dojo camps in Stamford, Connecticut, in the old warehouse.
Oh yeah.
And I think I had the record for like 10 of them. I think Andrew Martin Test. I think he was second, or maybe he tied me or something. But Kurt Angle was part of one of these groups that every month or every couple of weeks would have a bunch of guys. They'd fly in for tryouts, and if they liked you but you weren't quite ready, they'd invite you back. I lived there. They just took me in, and my developmental deal was right there in Stamford. So I basically was right there with Tom Pritchard every day. And but yeah, Kurt came in, and I was an amateur wrestler, of course, and I looked up to Kurt for what he had done by winning the world championships and becoming the Olympic gold medalist, right, in '96. So I was like a mark for amateur wrestling. I was like, man, anything he needs, man, to train, I'm there, So we ended up traveling together, Kurt and I. We were on the road for a while. He was doing dark matches while I broke in as meat, my rookie year. He picked up really fast. And I remember we had some great matches, actually, some dark matches that no one will have ever seen, right? Because it was never recorded unless someone recorded it somewhere. But we just had great chemistry because I really respected him. And I think there was a mutual respect because of my background. I didn't know how big... I guess I didn't think about it back then. I knew that he was green, but I knew he was a great athlete, an Olympic gold medalist, and trained real hard, very committed. And I just thought, man, if he's got that kind of commitment and, to be able to win an Olympic gold medal, and he really puts his heart and mind into this, I mean, why wouldn't he excel in this, So I don't know. Looking back now, I don't, and this is no disrespect to Kurt at the time, but I don't know if I would have seen him as big as he got. And now we know he's one of the best.
Absolutely. And Jack Reynolds wants to know, what match would you say was where you had your best individual performance, let's say? Maybe not so much your favorite match, but where you think like this was me at my very best during my career.
It's funny, but the two matches that stick out in my mind as a singles competitor, was that the question? Yeah.
Either way, whether it be a tag or singles, whichever comes to mind.
I think the one that really stands out to me is I had two matches with Chris Jericho in New York, Albany, New York, and somewhere else. Two shots in New York, and they were house shows. And I just remember everything. I had never experienced professional wrestling like I did that night, and I'll tell you why. Here are all the elements. When I walked out to the ring, I had more roaring deep boos than I had ever heard. I was like, this is awesome, because I was a heel, right? But it was they were emotionally invested for some reason. I was not like that night, which is great for me. That's a pop for me. Chris comes out, place erupts. So the polarity of the boos and then the cheers was like, this is great. Everything he did, they popped. Everything I did, they booed. It was the crowd reaction, the connection with the crowd that I had never felt before. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it's because he was a veteran at the time, even back that was 20 years ago. I mean, he was more experienced than I was, and he was over as Chris Jericho, right, back then. Mm-hmm. I felt that it brought out the best in me, and it did. And so I just felt, man, I was just on. Everything was on, just my transitions, my punches, kicks, psychology was there. And I was listening. He was leading. But everything I did, it was so easy, Jonathan. It was like, oh my God, this is what they talk about. When you have it down like that, it was great. And then the time he put me in the walls of Jericho, that place was erupted. And so anyway, it was, it got back. I mean, when The Undertaker and Mark Calloway or Steven Regal walk up to you after and shake your hand and say, hey man, I watched you tonight and you had a really pleasant match tonight. You did really good. That's like the biggest compliment you can get, especially from those guys, you know? So that's what really stands out to me. I wish they were recorded some. I wish that we could watch them back, because I'd be very interested to see what that looked like. 'Cause I knew what it felt like, and I knew the reaction it got, not from just the crowd, but the boys, the agents, and then Vince heard about it, and guess what? I ended up getting a raise the next week. So I must have done something right.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that's sweet. That's sweet. Paul Fraser wants to know, what did the Mecca on your tights stand for? Or what was the meaning behind it?
It's funny, man. I think Terry Taylor came up with that. You're the Mecca of manhood, like, because I had this vain character, almost like Rick Rude, a cross between Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect, and I don't know who else. Anyway, just very arrogant. Maybe Lex Luger, which I could see on your wall there when he's the.
Oh yeah, we got him over here. Yes.
So I think he just came up with that. You know what? You need to get something on the back of your tights and something that represents your arrogance. How about the Mecca of manhood? Something. It's funny in pro wrestling. The stupidest things out of the blue just happen. They say by accident, and then it's like, oh, that's a good catchphrase. Yeah, that's a good word. That's how it happened. So I just got Mecca put on the back of my trunks. I think, and even in one of my pre-taste backstage, I was working with Steve Austin, Stone Cold, and Deborah at the time, his wife. And I'm like, I think in one of my, at the time, I don't think I even knew what it meant. I was like, I don't even know what Mecca means. But it was on my trunk.
Yeah. I remember. That's cool, man. That's cool. So just before we go, you kind of alluded to it earlier on. Give us your thoughts on everything that's happening in the wrestling world at the moment, currently, like with AEW and everything. Like things are pretty hot at the moment with Punk's return and everything. What do you think about everything that's going on WWE, AEW at the moment?
So I'm gonna watch what I say here, because I might ruffle some feathers, but then at the same time, I'm just being authentic and real. I don't watch. I do a lot of DVRing, put it that way. So I fast forward through a lot of stuff. I think a lot of us do.
DVR.
And I just, I come from a background where, look, not all people can look the same body types or bodybuilder type. I was more of a body guy. I was just, let's face it, I was inspired by the better physiques. And at the time that was, and that was kind of a prototype for Vince McMahon. He liked those types of looks, right? And bodies and whatnot.
Absolutely.
The business has changed a lot since my time, even 20 years, I'm never going to be one of those guys that says, well, back in my day, kid, my era was this, that, and the others, and yours is the shits. Well, I'm not gonna be that guy. But there's elements of the business that I think have been lost. It's an art. Some elements of the art has been lost, and then again, the fans today embrace certain styles of today's wrestling. I just personally don't agree with it, and I can't get completely into it, but I accept it for what it is. So, and it's not being I don't mean to sound disrespectful to anybody, but I just come from a certain cloth, and I'm proud of it, man. And it's just, I know that if I, let's say hypothetically, was back in the wrestling realm, I know how I'm going to portray myself and how I'm going to represent myself. And I have a lot of pride in that, man. Just from growing up around the business, my dad's era, my era, and even being away for as long as I have, you learn about yourself as a man. You learn about yourself, in the world, learn about the world. I'm not the same guy as I was 20 years ago. And I've often thought, it'd be really interesting to showcase this inner character that I didn't realize it existed all this time, that I could exude on camera. I can tell you right now, I think it would be great for ratings, because it would piss a lot of people off. And I think a lot of people, though, of my era and generation fan base that we lost might come back. Anyway, I love comebacks. I love redemption stories. when CM Punk made his return, and I was never a huge CM Punk fan, I'll be quite honest with you, but I did follow him a little bit when he went after his UFC dream, which I give him all the credit in the world. He had balls to do it. He went out there, definitely. He fought. You know, I really gained a lot of respect. I gained for that guy. He took a lot of criticism and all that. It's like, screw those people. They don't. You try it then, you know, like.
Yeah, exactly.
Same with Brock trying out for football, you know, the NFL. I mean, you know, you gotta try different things, man, you know. And I have more respect for people, you know, win, lose, or draw. As long as you went out there and gave it your all, that's all you can, you know, that to me is a winner. That's a champion, man, deep down. But when he came back, man, and of course I was in New York City for an autograph signing at the time, and the only thing I could watch it off was my phone on YouTube. Man, I must have rewound it and watched that entrance, the whole thing, actually, the full, I think it was 18 minutes from the entrance. I just had, I got goosebumps right now thinking about it, man. It was freaking awesome. Yeah. It was awesome. And it's times like those, it's experiences like that, those, why we all get into this business, to create those memories, to create those very far and few between, those rarities, that he had that connection with the crowd. Now, of course, it's in Chicago, the anticipation, it was all the stars were aligned. It was a perfect way to bring him in. But I love what moved me, and I've talked to a few people about it, was just the authenticity, the realness, the organicness, the connection with the crowd. I mean, people were crying. It was just a really amazing experience. And I don't want to over dramatize this, but that's what, you know, that term art imitates life, you know, and that was one of those moments where art, which is pro wrestling, taken parallels of a shoot, reality parallels, and incorporating those into a work environment. That's professional wrestling, man. And that's what I think, that's what I'm drawn to. That's why I'm fast forwarding my DVR. Very so often, very, very rare, I'll come across a certain promo, a back and forth in the ring, even it's like the actual wrestling match is almost like window dressing. It's almost like, who gives a shit about how many flips and moves and whatever you do if people aren't emotionally invested? That's the whole point of pro wrestling, is to get people emotionally invested. And so I loved it. I thought it was great. And I think Punk was also probably humble just in life and going through his trials and tribulations and what, you know, going through what he went through with WWE, his experience, and then the UFC, and then now this. I think it's great, man. I'm happy for him, and I'm a Punk fan now. I'm pulling for him. I just hope we can keep the momentum. It's only going to last so long. And that's what I love about Punk. He's very honest. He's very authentic and real. And I love real, Jonathan. Yeah. And that's why, you know, I'm developing myself as a speaker, a wellness life coach, because I love nothing more than connecting with people like you and I right now, and just having, I love real. I love, and also showcasing and sharing more so your failures, your hardships, your shortcomings. I've had so many of them. It's one, you know, who gives a crap about someone who like, oh, so-and-so is successful, and they have all these titles and labels. And, you know, people will come to me and say, oh, man, you know, you've had success. You were, you know, in the wrestling world. People know who you are. You're a doctor. You stayed in shape, and you got all. They think that, you know, I've got the world by the balls, right? And I'm very grateful for some of the attributes and things, and what, I've worked for everything I have. But, man, have I ever had failures. And I still wrestle. The biggest opponent that I wrestle with is the one you see in your monitor right now. I wrestle with him every day, okay? And what I've learned is, and that's going to be part of this YouTube channel, part of my speaking events that I may be putting on soon, some virtual stuff, so just stay tuned for that. I love sharing, and it's probably therapeutic for me, you know, to get it out and filter it in a way that I can deliver it, but people can resonate with it and apply it. They hear a story and an example. Maybe I'll make a couple suggestions, like, don't do what I did here. You know, don't try this or what. And I get feedback like, man, I tried this, or I heard your story, or what. And it really, truly changed my life. Boy, man, that is, again, goosebump moments. I love creating goosebumps and inspiration and being real and knowing that I made a contribution to someone's life, whether I played a role in a wrestling ring, whether the Phobia character did something cinematic, or on a video project, or whatever, a social media post, or just holding the door for someone at the grocery store. I just love to be real with people and know that something that I contributed in a way really made a difference in their lives. So I know that's a little bit down a rabbit hole, but getting back to today's wrestling, I love the authenticity and the realness of the Punk thing. I'm excited for AEW. I think I've been backstage a couple times and met Tony Khan once. Seems like a really nice guy, very, very respectful. Everybody seemed to be, for the most part, really cool. And I think it's great for the wrestling business. I hope that they have all the success in the world. Competition creates, success. And it's a great opportunity for the boys, for the talent, for the girls. I got to say girls too, the boys and girls, right? And it's great for the fans, man. How excited are you as a wrestling fan because of this?
I like it. I mean, I'm kind of in a similar mindset as yourself. There are some things in both companies, in the wrestling business in general now, that it's in terms of the in-ring style anyway, the lack of realism at times bothers me. It just goes a little too far out there in terms of spots and just not making quite the effort of, getting me as a fan to suspend my disbelief. But there are still some really, really great talents that are there is still enough moments to kind of keep me hooked in. But like yourself now, I do DVR.
Yeah.
But overall, it's brilliant to have competition again, and just that dynamic of where wrestlers are going to go again. Like this, Punk jumping to AEW has really ignited that. Daniel Bryan now as well. So there's that dynamic again, like it was back in the Monday Night Wars, as they say, with guys jumping back and forth, and you never knew where some guys were going to end up, right. So it's made it really interesting in those terms. So it's a brilliant time to be a fan, but thank God for DVR at the same time.
Yeah. And that's the one thing about today's wrestling that I don't like is all these spots and moves, and it's like, come on, man, you've done 20 finishes now. The guy keeps kicking out. I don't know. What happened to a Rick Rude neck breaker? Just one, boom, that's it. It's done. One punch, my dad's heart punch, wham, done.
Yes.
Now look, I'm being maybe a little too simplistic, but you got to have, finishes and false finishes and excitement, and there's a way of doing it, but man, it's a little overboard, I think, with the finishes especially. I agree with you. And it's not, I always say it's not Circus Olay, it's not gymnastics class. This is professional wrestling, and there's got to be a fine balance, I think, an element of power, strength, strongman, size differences, just when you do things, how you, body language, there's, your cadence and when you're speaking and how you pronounce words and when you deliver. I mean, there's so many elements to pro wrestling and not everyone can be the same, just like body types. You can't have all bodybuilders. That would be boring if you had all fat guys or you had all giants or all midgets. You got to have a mixture of all the diversity, right? But I think within each context of that diversity, you need to stay within a parameter lane, right? To keep things realistic. Even though we know it's a work, if I go to a movie and I'm suspending my disbelief, I get pissed off. It's like, okay, come on, dude. This guy should be dead by now. This guy just keeps coming back. You got to have some elements of reality. And when you watch a movie or you see a match like that, it's like, oh, well done. It just seems like it's been far and few between lately, but it is what it is.
Yeah, there's still moments here and there. There's still matches here and there, but yeah, it is a little. I actually think WCW almost had the perfect balance in the late 90s, 2000s, because you had the high flying stuff and all that kind of thing, but within the cruiserweight division, but it was kind of kept in that niche, and that was very popular, but it didn't seep all the way through the card. You had power guys, you had a lot of different dynamics in terms of styles and everything. So I think that's what's needed, just that bit more variety and just a little bit more grounded in realism and a bit more grounded in kind of good and evil type dynamics then as well, rather than everything kind of shades of gray so. But again, there is there is a lot of good stuff out there at the same time. Like, so I don't want to beat on it too much.
Yeah. And I'm in the same boat too. I think there's certain wrestlers it doesn't, there's an optical element where I understand if someone's got great moves and they're very technical, but there's size differences. And I'm sorry, but I have a hard time accepting some of these world heavyweight champions. I just do. That's why I thought in WCW as well, when you mentioned that, I think WWE had this years ago, you have a cruiserweight division that's just as prestigious. It's like saying Floyd Mayweather is the champion in his weight class, whatever that is, 150 pounds, and you got, Mike Tyson and, the heavyweights in this division. The heavyweight division is probably the big. If you're the world champion as a heavyweight, really in anything, you're kind of the man, I guess. But it doesn't take away from a cruiserweight or a middleweights that are. Look at George St. Pierre. Look at who are some of these
Conor McGregor,
Floyd
Mayweather, even like you
mentioned. Right. They're smaller guys, but it's very prestigious, So why? Yeah, it's just too much blurring the lines for me too, And I think you need to keep people in their lanes. And there's enough people in each lane to work with and create magic, You don't have to. I think Rey Mysterio, was the first real small guy. Did he not go over on Kevin Nash or something? I forget. I think that's what it was.
Yeah. They're in like 99. Yeah, he went over on Nash. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if you have something like that happen once in a blue moon, that's fine. That's cool. 1, 2, 3 Kid went over on Scott Hall or stuff
Scott
like
Hall,
that.
Yeah.
There's been a couple. Yeah. But it just is. I think it's gotten a little bit just unrealistic,
Yeah, definitely. So hopefully, it gets more grounded in all that. But I want to thank you so much for your time today, man. It's been absolutely awesome talking to you. You always know it's a good interview when the time absolutely flies by, and the time has flown by on this, man. It's been absolutely awesome. Finally getting to connect with you, and it's been brilliant, man. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Jonathan. I really enjoyed this as well, and I do want to say this, not just saying this because you're in Ireland, but I've always I love the UK, man. I did one of those DNA tests, those. I think it was what are they called? I did one a couple years ago. Anyway, it came back that I was 53% Russian and Baltic countries. However, I had 23% like Norwegian, Swedish, and then like 20% the rest was like Scotland, Ireland, Wales. So I've got that UK blood in me, and I've always loved going back. I've always felt drawn, to the UK. So I'd love to come back to visit. I hope I get that opportunity soon, and we'll definitely have to have a couple ales or whatever you drank over there in Ireland. What do you call them? Whiskeys?
Pints.
Pints. There you go. Pints.
Couple of pints. Yeah, for sure, man.
Yeah, I love my UK fans, so I want to get a shout out to them. They always seem very loyal and supportive. And just follow me on my social media. It's on Twitter and Instagram is Dr. Shawn, DRSHAWN 008. And of course, Facebook is Shawn Stasiak -Stippich. I use Stasiak as the first name because it's more recognizable, but Stippich is my real last name. For people that, you got long lost relatives and people that knew you from high school that may not know Stasiak. They know Stippich though, right? So that's why I have it like that. Most married women have the double name thing. Why do you have two names, two last? Pick one, Stasiak or Stasiak. Well, that's why I did that. So people can find me. And then the YouTube channel is Shawn Stasiak's World. So check it out.
Awesome, man. Can't wait to see everything that you have coming up. And thanks again, man. It's been awesome.
Yes, Jonathan. Thanks for having me. God bless, brother. Take care.
Take care, my man.
Bye-bye.